gradually developing a kind of vocabulary of weight and speed, almost as if there's 100 different positions.
I had the chance to chat with Berlin Philharmonic principal bassist Matthew McDonald. That's, of course, who you just heard right there in that opening quote. I had the chance to chat with him as I was putting the finishing touches on my Winning the Audition book last year. And it's another example of how it's like wheels within wheels and connections leading to other connections, this crazy podcasting journey that I'm on. I got connected with Matthew through Andrew Rosidi, the wonderful bass professor at Northwestern University. Andy also plays in the Milwaukee Symphony. And he suggested, this is back when I was still living in Chicago. I walked down the street to Northwestern University. We chatted in his office, the same office that I took bass lessons in when I was a student at Northwestern for 6 years with both Michael Hovnanian and then going back to high school with Jeff Raditich. I could go on and on with all these shared connections, but I won't. Anyway, long story short, Andy connected me with Matthew. We had a wonderful conversation. One of those, not sure, I've never met him before, seems like a fascinating guy. There's not a lot out there about him in terms of bass. And we had one of those super deep, inspiring conversations that made me really rethink the way I practice and even think about sound in general. And that is what I love so much, more than just about anything about doing this show, is being privileged to experience revelations like that. That might sound a little pretentious, but that's how I felt talking with Matthew, and I felt like I was a different bass player before and after. How cool is that? And then fast forward 6 months, and I'm hanging out with Nicholas Walker, president of the International Society of Bassists. We're hanging out in Ithaca with Matt McDonald, partying late into the evening, seeing him perform. This is such a cool journey this whole podcasting thing is, and it is my privilege and honor to bring you this conversation, which feels like not long ago and a long time ago at the same time. And we have some great sponsors for this episode. Robertson and Sons. They specialize in providing the highest quality stringed instruments and bows to collectors, to professional musicians, to music educators, and to students of all ages. If you have not been to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and checked out their fantastic facility and their recital hall, yes, they have a recital hall in the shop, you need to get yourself on a plane and over to Albuquerque and Robertson's. I had such a blast a few weeks ago in Albuquerque. My wife's from Albuquerque, by the way, trying out their basses and their bows. I was like a kid in a candy store. And you owe it to yourself to get down there and check out their wonderful instruments. We have some other wonderful sponsors I'll share later in the episode, but let's dive in. I know you want to hear this wonderful conversation with Berlin Philharmonic principal bassist Matthew McDonald. What was your first musical instrument?
When I was very little, I played the violin kind of terribly in a Suzuki group. And then we moved around a lot. So then I stopped. And then when I was about 12, started up again with violin. But I never practiced it, and I hated it. But they had this kind of violin group at lunchtimes. I think it was Thursdays, 1 o'clock or something like that. And I was put in the third violin.
Oh.
You know, the teacher kind of said, we need the strongest players in the third violin. And I didn't believe it then. But there's this other guy, another really, apparently very strong player in the third violins, who played kind of bass lines on his violin. Like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Nice.
And I asked him what that was, and he told me what it was, and then he showed me he had a bass guitar there, and he also played double bass. And then that was it. I just decided that's what I want to do. I want to play bass. And originally I wanted to do rock and jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And then so over summer I practiced. I got a bass, electric bass, and borrowed a double bass, and then just kind of worked on it by myself over the summer, and then started having real lessons, and was given a bow, and then I was kind of disappointed to get another bow. I thought I was leaving all that violin stuff behind me.
Right.
But then pretty much, yeah, I would have been about 15 then, And half a year later, I was already playing in youth orchestras. I started to love it. And then I was very lucky. After a year, I went to one of Australia's finest bass players, Max McBride, because I got into the preliminary studies course at the Canberra School of Music. So for the last 2 years of school, I was going to preliminary studies course, having lessons with Max, doing theory and history, playing in string groups, playing orchestras. And yeah, so pretty much it just kind of took off straight away. Being in Canberra, there's quite a lot going on, but not enough bass players. And so in a way, just having an instrument was kind of enough to get a gig somewhere. So
Sure.
I had lots of experience very young. So I think that was a really good thing. I had a great education.
What was it like going to Sydney after that? Because Sydney is such a cosmopolitan city.
Yeah, eventually I'd been traveling around, I'd been to Europe and I'd been to a number of courses and I'd had enough of camp. So yeah, I went to Sydney, studied with Kees Boersma, who's principal in Sydney Symphony. Mm-hmm. And, it was what I needed. I needed a big city. It was so much fun. I mean, I played a lot in the Sydney Symphony and did lots of gigs, and I loved the city. It was great, particularly Sydney with so many great beaches. It's a very kind of hedonistic time in a way. It was just unique beaches, parties. It was a great time. Sydney was it was great fun. Great place to study. Yeah.
What was it like playing in that opera house? Because that's where the symphony plays also, right? It's not just the opera. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most iconic buildings in the world. It must be kind of an interesting experience going to that place for work when you have tourists around checking it out.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's something you never, ever get sick of.
Yeah.
And I remember Kees telling me that at the time. As you walk along the promenade towards the opera house and you've got it in view and the harbour bridge to the left and the big sky and the bright sun blading. It's just kind of overwhelming view you never ever get kind of used to. Every morning or every afternoon or evening going there was kind of amazing. Inside is not so great because it's kind of, there's not much natural light, and the hall itself was pretty good. Mm-hmm. But just walking up there and just to be working in his building, as you said, which tourists are taking pictures of. Yeah, it's a really cool experience.
You ended up you did a year in the Orchestra Academy in Berlin. What was that experience like? That must have been quite a contrast.
Yeah, I think I just finished doing Goethe in Sydney with the Sydney Symphony, and I've been playing a lot in orchestra. Yeah, and then I got off the plane, went and stayed with a friend or something, and then went and saw the guy in the bass section who organizes his playing. He said, "Oh, can you play next week? It's Bartok Concerto for Orchestra with Maurice Janssons." And so I just kind of freaked out in a way. And then I had to learn quickly to play on a monster-sized 5-string. I'd played 5 strings before, but the ones that the Phil owns, most of them are quite big. And it's different. And, everyone played on 5 strings. I couldn't understand how people were getting so much sound out of them, because the more kind of vertical pressure you put into it, the less the bass wanted to give back. I couldn't understand it at the beginning, kind of people getting sound out of these things. But the biggest thing, the rehearsals were great. It was so easy. It's so easy to play in the orchestra. It's kind of basically together because there's a strong chamber music thing. So in a way, it was kind of liberating because it was just so easy. Things didn't fall apart or something like that. But then I'll never forget the first concert, that everything was softer or louder than we'd rehearsed it. Like the rehearsals were more or less, you do some good work, but it was the first time I'd experienced such a big difference between concert and rehearsal, where the concerts weren't just something where you hoped that would go as well as the rehearsals. Everything was different, dynamics and the energy and everything kind of gained so much more intensity. That was an incredible experience. Yeah, I've never felt that before.
Yeah, that's interesting that there'd be that. I mean, because that's one of those hallmarks of the great orchestras you hear about, but you really felt that.
Yeah, that was, it was really scary because in rehearsal, the beginning of Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, I was thinking, this is all fine. And then suddenly on stage, I thought I was the only one who could be heard. It was just so much softer.
Wow.
Yeah, and just the energy, this is such a different thing. Kind of the energy of an orchestra going out there with this real desire to perform. Yeah, it was like, being on I'm not a surfer or something, but I can imagine, it's like surfing on a good wave or something. It was exhilarating.
I picture Berlin, the bass section. I just picture those guys on those big 5 strings. And what did you have to do technically to open up the sound on those? What did you do in your technique to get that?
Well, the first thing I misunderstood, because I could see a lot of, the orchestra of strings use a lot of bow. Mm-hmm. And what it took me a while to comprehend was using a lot of bow, but with constant contact. I saw a lot of bow being used, so I tried to use a lot of bow, and all that produced was kind of fluffy sound. So to try and maintain a constant contact through a big kind of fast bow, that was a lot of work. I mean, also just a lot more total physicality into the bow. People move more or less. Some people don't move so much. Some people move quite a lot. But I think it just creates. I think before, my concept of bow stroke had been maybe thinking about it from the wrist, the fingers, maybe the forearm, and that was about it. And then people kept talking about the sound coming from the back and almost the full body. So trying to understand that. And then I did a lot of mimicking. I would look in the mirror, trying to find parts of each player in the section of their bow stroke, of how they appear, and then try and let my body copy it, try to feel what I was feeling. But it took a long time, but I think in the end, the biggest thing that helped was this was after the academy, but a lot of lessons with a viola teacher, Gertrude Rosbacher, and basically just the principle of starting a note. We spent a month on that, twice a week, just basically starting a note, relaxing the arm and starting the note. And then I found once I had that under control, then it was a lot easier to get through the whole bow with constant contact and a constant sound, which is, so important for legato. But anyway, just to get those huge strings on that huge instrument swinging at all is just so much kind of pulling and getting the balance of weight and pull. Also, it's a lot of rosin as well. Yeah. To be honest, it's a lot of rosin.
Hey, it's modern day Jason, and that's one of those takeaways that totally made me rethink how I thought about starting the string and starting the note. I just got so much out of this conversation, and we dig even deeper into that topic here as we go in the episode. I really hope you're digging this. And I want to give a shout out to our other sponsors, the Bass Violin Shop. They offer repairs, restorations, setups at reasonable prices. So whether you have just an open seam or you need a top-off restoration, the Bass Violin Shop is a great place. They will help you through that process. They're great for C extensions, custom C extensions, new bass bars, new fingerboards, whatever you need on your instrument. The Bass Violin Shop will work hard to get the most out of your instrument without blowing your budget. Check them out at bassviolinshop.com. And thank you also to the Upton Bass String Instrument Company. Upton has this great model called the Bostonian that they developed in collaboration with Lynn Seaton. That's a wonderful world-renowned Lynn Seaton. He teaches at the University of North Texas. I was sitting in on his jazz class a couple months back when I was in Texas, and so cool that Lynn and Gary and the folks at Upton collaborated on what Lynn liked in a bass. So the result of this conversation that Lynn and Gary had at the 2009 ISB convention, that's what ended up being the Bostonian Concert Double Bass. Upton's a great company. They've been around for a while at this point, and they are evolving so quickly. I'm just so excited to have them on board, and I've been a fan for a long time. I've had several students play their basses. I've interviewed many people at this point that play Upton basses. They're good folks. They do great work, and they're always evolving and experimenting. Check them out at uptonbass.com. And finally, check out thechromaticinpin.com. My friend Emilio Guarino, amazing bass player, entrepreneur, creative individual. He's always trying to find ways to solve problems, unique solutions for things that bass players are struggling with. And he came up with the chromatic end pin, which is a totally customizable angled end pin. I myself have been a straight end pin person my whole life. This is my first experiment with an angled end pin. I love it. I've tried all sorts of different angles with it. I've tried it sitting down, standing up. It's a great solution, and it's a great solution because I can put it on whatever bass I happen to be wherever I'm at. I do a lot of traveling. I'm playing a lot of basses that are not my own, and I've always been worried about getting tied into a setup that requires something like an angled end pin, because then what if I have a straight end pin, right? It's kind of awkward. This is a great solution, folks. Thechromaticinpin.com. Check out the website. It's a great website, great demos of the end pin in action, testimonials, all that kind of good stuff. Thanks, Emilio, for sponsoring the podcast. And folks, I know you're going to love the remainder of this conversation with Matthew McDonald. Thanks so much for listening, and we're jumping back in, going even deeper into these concepts of bow usage. Wow. Spending a couple months just starting the string, just starting the notes. What did those exercises look like? What did you practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'd get it. And I was preparing for an audition at the time. And I just wanted to do this stuff. And I thought, it's a little bit like Karate Kid. So I don't need to learn karate. No, I don't need to learn how to wash the window. I need to learn karate,
Right.
And, I've got an audition in 6 weeks. I don't want to just, but stuck with it, because what I would do is get me put my bow on the string and completely relax the arm, completely relax the whole arm and hand, and let the weight into the string, and then just move the bow. And if I'd done that as she'd said to, then the sound was awful because it was too much weight. And so then we'd modify it, just going very slowly, so that gradually developing a kind of vocabulary of weight and speed. That by now, I kind of almost as if there's 100 different positions, where I have my arm according to the weight. Mm-hmm. But really getting in touch with how that affects, so that you can start a note without an accent, with good sound straight away, but no accent. You basically putting the bow on the string and adjusting weight, and then getting the speed right. But lots of failing. That was very, very important to it. Lots of notes starting with an awful scratch. And if I didn't start with an awful scratch, I'm not supposed to have full weight. She'd say, "No, you're cheating.
Okay.
Let's hear it. How you
Uh-huh.
So really, really going into it and noting everything that happened, from the scratch to there being too little weight to just some kind of fluffy sound. So the full spectrum of the combination of weight and speed was kind of stored in there. And I think that's really important, particularly when you've got, difficult kind of orchestral solo to play, like Mile of One, where you just need to be able to rely on starting that note and getting through the rest of the bow. And once you've got that much down, it kind of plays itself. But unless you can start the note, it's going to be scary.
I find this really interesting, just this conversation. When you're getting ready to start, like let's say that Mahler solo or something like that, how early do you get the bow on the string before you actually start the sound? Do you have something specific in mind? Is it bow on string and then you start, or you set and relax, or what do you do?
I think I put it on the third beat of the second bar.
Oh, okay.
Or I start lifting the arm on the third beat. I can't remember exactly, but I find if you're there too early, you start to get nervous, and if it's there too late, then it's too hectic. So I think the last time I did it, I think I decided the third beat of the second bar of timpani was a good time to get the bow up onto the string. And then with that solo, I kind of I just have the bow divided up so that when I start, I know exactly its contact point, and then how much of the bow to the first note, how much for the second, just so that I can feel free. So I kind of have worked out that thing so that I can feel free, because I get very nervous for it, so that I've got as much to fall back on as possible. And every detail, like when to put the bow on the string.
And you've got that bow divided up, so you know this, like that first quarter, you're using a certain amount of bow, and right there, and contact point and everything, you've got that all planned out?
Yeah, I've got it all pretty much totally planned, to the point that planned so that it becomes second nature. So I don't have to think about it when I'm doing it, but that it's practiced in. And the biggest thing I found is just not to use, I start with an up bow, use 2 bows per bar, start with an up bow. It's just to not use your up bow too quickly on the first note. Basically, I find with most students, the problem is that the up bow is used too quickly. So I always try and use, maybe a third of up bow for the beginning note, and then 2/3 of the bow for the second note, which helps the phrase anyway. But the problem is if you've used half the bow on the D, and then you use the other half of the E, and you're getting into this kind of risky frog area.
Interesting. And I'm just thinking about that in terms of other excerpts or audition preparation in general. Is that kind of the approach you took to the rep that you were preparing for auditions, that kind of detail?
Yeah, I find that kind of detail, for my audition for Berlin Phil, I think I knew each contact point at each part of the bow I'd be using for each note. Not that it's really analytical. It's kind of stupid, really. It's so easy to do. It's very easy work. And then once it's in, I find it's in. And usually things just sound bad if you run out of bow. But yeah, certainly I would do that. Yeah, but now it's more second nature. When someone first mentioned bow distribution, in my early 20s, I just kind of thought it sounded really unmusical and really analytical, but it's just so stupidly easy to do. You just have to. But it just took me so long to believe that the reason why maybe a certain big shift going up was sounding terrible was just, the bow was getting squashed in the frog, or the other way around. I just didn't have enough bow to do it.
When you were getting ready for that Berlin audition, what was your preparation process like for that? Like what did that work look like for you? Because I know you had a job at the same time. What was that preparation like?
Yeah, I was then in Deutsche Symphony Orchestra, and I think the audition was in April 2008, and I started practicing for it in September 2007. Yeah, I started practicing quite a lot then, September, and then basically got it to a point about a month or two before where I was running it every day or two to people. I even played it to a bunch of 4-year-olds once.
Oh, really?
I would just use it. Yeah, anybody was an audience. Yeah, but I'd have lots of friends come out and listen, or I'd go to them. I did. It's a big run-throughs just for a couple friends. I don't know how many I did, dozens. So that by the time of the audition, I felt like I'd been through as many possible kind of nerve-creating scenarios as possible. Yeah, I felt very free on the day. There's really no getting around that. Basically, being on stage is half the work. And, a lot of students basically make the mistake. They'll run it through for their tape recorder or something, but it's very different than playing it to your peers. And
do you remember what was on the list when you auditioned?
It's only a few excerpts. 3 Beethoven excerpts, the scherzo from Beethoven 3 and Beethoven 5, and the recitative from Beethoven 9. Actually, for the principal, we didn't even have the tutti excerpts. Actually, for this job, it was Mahler 1, the Otello solo or group solo, Haydn 31 solo, Pulcinella, maybe something else I've forgotten. But yeah, there weren't many excerpts and only solos. With those excerpts, you can kind of tell, you need one or two excerpts to see if someone can bounce the bow. You don't need 30. And we don't have difficult excerpts either. They're difficult. But things like Heldenleben and stuff like that, it's tricky. Yeah, for auditions, I think you have to compromise so much of the spirit of the piece to play it in a kind of audition style.
Well, that's interesting that it's just the solo excerpts. Is that standard throughout European jobs if you're auditioning for a solo chair?
No, actually, no. My other job was principal. I also played the normal excerpts. Every orchestra does it a little bit different. But on my orchestra, I think 20 violins don't play orchestral excerpts.
Do you have anything, what do you do to keep your chops in shape these days? If you have 30 minutes or an hour to practice, do you have a specific daily technical routine that you do? Yeah, if I only have half an hour, I'll do Petrarchy exercises basically, and some scales, and a couple Duncan McDonald exercises. And I change it sometimes. Sometimes there's a couple of Joel Quarringtons as well. But definitely these chromatic thumb position stuff from Petrarchy and the exercises for fifths and stuff, scales, arpeggios. Now I've started studying studies. Now I start playing studies. I never did them before, but just in the last year I started doing them. Because I always did lots of Bach, and I do Bach if I have time as well, usually first, second, or fifth suite. But yeah, if it's really just staying in shape, basically Petrarchy, maybe some Bach mostly, and then maybe I'll do a couple of things to check vibrato, legato, stuff like that. I might do a bit of Glier or Franck Sonata, just a little bit, just to check that. And then I find, kind of keeps me healthy actually. Playing an orchestra, teaching, and doing half an hour's practice is often not bad. That's interesting that you started working on studies like Etudes and that sort of material recently. What inspired you to do that? Well, there have been some competitions recently where my students have had to play studies. The nanny studies, I can't remember what the competition was. And they're tricky. And so all my students were playing them. They had to play them from memory as well. I just thought, I want to practice this too. Sure. Because I was consistently having to teach them. I thought, well, I'm going to learn these. And they're really difficult. Not just difficult because of the technique, but difficult because they're kind of unpredictable. The notes seem almost random. It almost seems like you kind of just belted out the notes in any random order. So you can't really predict where you're supposed to go next. So you have to really kind of read it. I don't know if you've played them. Yeah, I have. They're very, it's like a random note generator kind of something. Yeah. Yeah, but there's something about that I think I need for my brain, because I realized the first time I was playing through Nanny, I would just kind of play the notes that my brain thought should come next instead of actually reading what was there. But I lose patience with stuff like that quite quickly. Sometimes I'll have these great bursts of motivation, think, right, I'm going to learn these studies perfectly. But then after a while, musically, they're just not interesting enough to give all my effort to. So they kind of get put aside for a while. You mentioned bow distribution with students. What are some other common stumbling blocks that you see with students that you work with? Intonation, of course, is always a thing. Sure. Mostly small intervals. It's like octaves and six and things like that going up high will be okay. But it'll be in the lower registers or lower down on the G string where the small intervals are often not cared for. So that's one thing, just kind of opening up people's ears to these smaller intervals, tones and semitones. Vibrato can be tricky. I find teaching vibrato is also very tricky. Some people, it'll be very fast and tight.
I think often holding the thumb too tight in the back of the neck is difficult. I sit when I play, and I notice a lot with students who stand. It seems really difficult to just not grab onto that neck with the thumb, because then that kind of brings in all kinds of tension. The vibrato just doesn't work, and the shifting doesn't work, and then the whole bass is moving about. I find that with people who stand, that's the most difficult. The biggest one I find actually is belief in the bridge. That's really tough, because that's, for a lot of people, it's a leap of faith, because, you know, the bass sounds so nice, so custom. But for the solo repertoire, where you need to play closer to the bridge, and then they'll move closer to the bridge, but with the same kind of bowing style as Sultasta, and it will sound bad, and then they'll give up. But of course, playing near the bridge needs a different feeling, because there's a lot more resistance, so it needs a different bowing style. And that can take a long time. Yeah, I took a long time as well to be convinced of the bridge, because it's the same thing. You go near the bridge, and then it sounds awful, and you think they're talking rubbish, so you give up.
Interesting. Do you have any, outside of just working on the repertoire and getting closer to the bridge, do you have any exercises that you have students do to get comfortable up there, closer to the bridge?
Not really exercise, but definitely long bows. I definitely encourage long, slow bowed scales, basically. But also just playing long notes, trying to get the bass to resonate more and more, and seeing where this point is, where the bass almost seems like you can almost see light coming out of it, where the overtones are so strong that you can almost see it. I'm just starting to enjoy just what you can get out of the instrument. And I think a lot of the thing is finding what the instrument needs. I think a lot of the time we give our own will, knowledge onto the instrument. And sometimes just having the patience to find out what the instrument needs, you know, just kind of spending time with it, not necessarily trying to achieve anything, except getting to know it better. So I still spend, sometimes I get lost in a trance just playing open strings, just trying to get them bigger and bigger and bigger. Or I'll spend at least 5 minutes on one note, seeing what I can do, getting nearer the bridge, adjusting the speed and stuff like that. But one note practice is great. Just staying on one note, trying to find a great color, and also always trying to find that sweet dolce piano color near the bridge, because we know how to do it for Costo, but I think it has a more vocal quality if it's closer to the bridge. Listening to older violinists, so much of that sweet sound, it's just this incredible contact point, the perfect kind of cherry-colored sweetness you get by the right weight and the right vibrato near the bridge. I think these days a lot of people opt on all instruments more for the kind of fluffy Sultasto as the kind of effect. But the problem is if you do that on bass, you're basically miming. So, you know.
That's such a great way to think of the resonance. I love the idea of getting lost in the resonance of the instrument.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much fun just hearing. I love to just listen to. I try and manipulate overtones. Just change the contact point and the speed to try and get different overtones. Try and get more of the seventh, or more of the fifth, or more of the third. And I just think all of that stuff is great, because I never did much in the way of exercises. I bought exercise books. So I think unless you know what you're looking for and what you're working for, you know, you could be just opening tins of sardines or something. You know, it's not going to help at all. Sure. You know, you might as well do something else.
Right.
But if you're really looking and really working, then I don't think the exercise itself is so important. I mean, I've always invented them. So I'll spend some time. Often what I do is so that I can be sure that I've got a good contact point at the tip. I'll just spend some time going bum, 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 whatever. Just a few minutes, just to make sure that I'm playing at the tip with a good contact and good sound. And I'll recommend, doing stuff like that. Also finding a posture for the bow which is comfortable at the tip. Because often I'll say to a student, okay, go to the tip, and then they can't. They have to kind of contort their body to get to the tip. Well, it's not bad to try and find a place where you can reach the tip easily.
What do you recommend to students in terms of dealing with stage fright and pressure situations? What do you have any advice for people that you give?
Of course, just performing as much as you can is the best way to deal with it. But in the moment where none of that's helping, I try and breathe. I try and slow down my heart rate. I mean, I remember times when my heart is beating so fast, and just breathe through it and try and slow the heart rate down. But it depends how much you're affected. I've always gotten very nervous, but I never got to the point where it's affecting my performance so much, because I've always loved the adrenaline rush of it. I've always loved the feeling of sweating, heart racing, that kind of feeling of not being totally in control. I always kind of liked it. I think if you can learn to love it, I think at some point, when I was quite young, maybe even 18 or 19, I just decided just to love it, just to be grateful for it. Because I think the other side of it, the same coin, is that incredible rush you get from playing a great concert. And I don't think you can expect to have one without the other. So I think it's just best to make friends with it and find your way around it. But this is why when I practice, I make sure I know everything I'm doing. Because stuff will go wrong. But the more you know what you're doing, if you know just by looking, the bow has to be there and move at this kind of speed, there's only so much nerves can destroy. But the more you prepare, the less it can damage you. I leave room for spontaneity for sure. Not with mellow on solo. There's no room for spontaneity there. But with a lot of things, you got to leave some room. Because I find nerves are. I also find them very inspiring, and I also find I play better when I'm nervous generally. And I think if people can start to enjoy that side of it, and also it's not to take yourself so seriously. People are so worried about making a mistake, but what they should really be worried about is boring the poor people who have to listen to them. Like that's more life-shattering than slipping a note or two. So the main thing is to get out there and realize it's your show. No one else is going to play this. You need to entertain. You need to play. You need to tell something and play some music. No one's interested in your problems. No one is interested in your success rate today. It's kind of getting out of yourself a little bit, letting go of the ego a little bit, and accepting that the reason you're there is to tell a story. Unfortunately, no one's interested in how well it went in the lounge room yesterday.
Right.
But definitely not doing beta blockers. I mean, I think the only way is just to perform more. The more nervous someone gets, then they should play 3,000 in public.
That's a great mindset for performance, and just embracing that rush.
That's what we do it for, isn't it? I mean,
I like to ask people, I get this, it can be kind of a hard question to answer, but if you could go back in time and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would you give?
Definitely to be less cocky, less arrogant. I think there were times that I was being given good advice, but I wasn't ready for it and dismissed it too quickly because I felt too insecure, probably. Also to practice intonation more carefully, to really listen. I think there were a few years I kind of probably grew a little deaf to my own intonation. But on the other hand, if I had have gotten a sort of intonation, I may have really lost my way as a musician. So that's hard to say. Because on the other hand, I can imagine that I think I probably would have lost my enthusiasm for the instrument if I had have only been thinking about that. But I think that's really important to be open and to try and see where someone is coming from. Even if you know it's not your thing, I find there's always something in someone's teaching or playing that you can take for yourself. I mean, now I'm greedy with it. Now I go to master classes and look on the internet and all that stuff. I'll just take. I'm like a greedy person at a buffet now.
There you have it, folks. I really hope you enjoyed that and got some valuable nuggets of wisdom, some ideas, some inspiration. I know I did. And I feel like I just talked to him, but it's actually been quite some time now, and hundreds of episodes, hundreds of episodes since we put that out. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it so much. Feedback at contrabassconversations.com will put you in touch with me. If you would like to hear any sort of topic explored, if you have a guest idea, if you just want to say hi, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. We will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.